Welcome to my channel. The final loss of the Crusader states. Crusading became increasingly costly by the end of the 13th century. Once upon a time, knights who served under a lord and paid for their own expenses made up a crusade army. Numerous nobility sought royal service as a result of economic difficulties. As a result, royal forces grew more disciplined, and many knights as well as foot soldiers were hired warriors. In addition, as royal authority increased, feudal lords were less able to put together major crusades and were more dependent on kings, who by nature were readily sidetracked by domestic affairs. Therefore, the Crusaders only saw a brief reprieve after Baybar's death in 1277. They continued to be divided and alone. They once more failed to unite with the Mongols, whom Sultan Khalan routed in 1281. The Il Khan Abaha, the Mongol leader in Iran, sent his deputy Rabban Salma to the kingdoms of Europe and the Pope to seek an alliance as the inefficiency of the Jerusalem administration was becoming evident even to Easterners. The endeavor was in vain. The last Crusader bastion on the mainland, Acre, was besieged in 1291 after Tripoli surrendered in 1289. The Mamluks captured the city after a valiant and desperate defense, and any citizens who survived the atrocities were sold into slavery. All of the castles along the Mediterranean coast, including Acre, the greatest cultural achievement of the Second Kingdom was the collection of legal treatises, the Assizes of Jerusalem. The sections that were compiled in the middle years of the century and, therefore, in the atmosphere of the wars against the agents of Frederick II constitute a veritable charter of baronial rights. In fact, two of the authors were members of the Ibelin family, and a third, Philip of Navarra, was a close associate. These sections indicate a shift from the earlier Book of the King, which more nearly reflects the attitudes of the 12th century. Nevertheless, the Assizes belong to medieval Europe's legal renaissance. The later Crusades. Europe was dismayed by the disaster of 1291. Pope Nicholas IV had tried to organize aid beforehand, and he and his successors continued to do so afterward, but without success. France, which had always been the main bulwark of the Crusades, was in serious conflict with England, which led to the outbreak of the Hundred Years' War in 1337. Moreover, the continued decline of papal authority and rise of royal power meant that most of Europe's warriors were busy at home. The best that the Church could do was to organize smaller crusade expeditions with very limited goals. The military instructions were no longer able to provide a standing force in the east. The Hospitallers seized Rhodes in 1308 and made it their base of operations. They took control of Smyrna in 1344 with little help, and they held it there until 1402. The Teutonic Knights had relocated their operations to the Baltic region in the meantime. Less fortunately were the Templars. Philip IV detained the French Templars in 1308, and Pope Clement V abolished the order in 1312. The last Grand Master of the order, Jacques de Molay, was finally burnt at the stake in 1314. Constantinople continued to resist the Turks even after losing its empire, but it was unable to do so for very long without assistance. In order to attend the Council of Florence in 1437, Emperor John VIII, the Patriarch of Constantinople, and representatives of the Greek clergy traveled to the west. The council openly discussed the disagreements that had divided the Latin and Greek churches. However, the Latin side prevailed since the Greeks were in dire need of Western assistance to rescue Constantinople. The emperor and patriarch formally proclaimed the reunification of the churches while acknowledging papal authority, but the Greek people refused to submit to Rome. Only in Spain did crusades meet with regular success. The unification of Aragon and Castile under Ferdinand and Isabella in 1479 gave Christian knights the opportunity to take up the cross against the remaining Muslims in Iberia. The campaigns continued throughout the 1480s and led to the surrender of Granada, the last Muslim stronghold, on January 12, 1492. Nearly 800 years after the first effort to expel the Muslims. The Reconquista was completed, and Christians across Europe rang church bells and marched in processions of thanksgiving. However, a few final remnants of the crusading movement survived its end. The Hospitallers relocated to the island of Malta after Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent expelled them from Rhodes in 1522, where they continued to participate in holy leagues. Additionally, they stayed loyal to their objective of helping the ill and needy by constructing a world-class hospital in Valletta, Malta, which drew patients from all over Europe. Up until Napoleon's expulsion of the Hospitallers in 1798, the island was under their control. They subsequently relocated to Rome and established a government in exile there. The Teutonic Knights declined after they were defeated by Poland and Lithuania in 1410. In 1525, the Grand Master, under Protestant influence, dissolved the order in Prussia and took personal control of its lands as a vassal of the King of Poland. The order was officially dissolved in 1809. The Austrian Emperor re-established the Teutonic Order as a religious institution in 1834, headquartering it in Vienna, where it remains today doing charitable work and caring for the sick. The results of the Crusades. The Crusades were once mainly blamed for the structural changes that occurred in European society throughout the 12th and 13th centuries. However, historians today frequently see the Crusades as just one, albeit important, aspect of Europe's evolution. It is conceivable that the Crusades contributed to the dissolution of certain families and the emergence of others, but broad generalizations must be avoided. Additionally, it should be kept in mind that some Crusaders left their property to loved ones through bequests while others sold or mortgaged it, mainly to ecclesiastical foundations. Although there were undoubtedly numerous casualties, many Crusaders did eventually reach their homes. Any genuine unification of the Eastern and Western churches was therefore impossible since the Crusades, especially the Fourth, so enraged the Greeks. Nevertheless, some Eastern Christians came to accept the Pope's authority, and they were typically allowed to continue using their own liturgies. Some of the connections that the Western Church had forged with its Eastern brethren survived, even if the majority of the missions that developed out of the Crusades disintegrated with the Ottoman Turks' march in the Middle East in the middle of the 14th century. It appears that in contrast to Sicily and Spain, the Latin East did not offer a route for the dissemination of Arabic science and philosophy to the West. However, the Crusades did significantly influence the growth of Western historical literature. In verse and prose, in the local language as well as in Latin, there were numerous chronicles. There is no agreement that the Crusades delayed the expansion of Islamic authority, although it is unclear by how much. They at least purchased much-needed time for Europe. It is difficult to see how Western Europe could have avoided being conquered by Muslim armies, which had already captured the rest of the Mediterranean world. Crusade as metaphor. The origin of the word crusade, which first arose in its Latin form in the late 12th or early 13th century, to describe any collective endeavor for a just cause, is one of the most enduring but least discussed effects of the Crusades. The idea of the Crusades evolved over several centuries, culminating in a movement that started in the late 11th century, from religio-military campaigns to modern metaphors for idealistic, zealous, and demanding struggles to advance the good, crusades for, and to oppose perceived evil, crusades against. The Crusades never lost popularity, which ensured that the Crusades never failed to capture the interest of historians, poets, novelists, composers, and encyclopedists during the Enlightenment, when medieval crusading was perceived as a rational fanaticism, and in the Romantic era, when the Crusades were seen as an adornment of the faith and an embodiment of chivalry. As a result, by the second half of the 18th century, the Crusade metaphor had developed, suggesting that at least some knowledge of the actual Crusades had existed. However, the adjustment took some time for English dictionaries to reflect. Metaphors empower. Moreover, metaphors are culturally specific and often convey value judgments. While modern historians attempt to understand the Crusades by placing them in the context of medieval religion, culture, it's important to note that the decline and fall of the Crusader states were influenced by a combination of military defeats, internal conflicts among Crusader leaders, changing political dynamics in Europe, and the growing power of Muslim forces in the region. The fall of these states marked the end of the major Christian presence in the Levant for centuries, although the memory of the Crusades and their impact persisted in history and continues to be a subject of study and debate.